All right, we're going to get going. So if everyone could join me in rising to say the pledge, please. Led by Mara. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us for our fourth zoning update public engagement session. Special thank you to Heather and the planning department for doing such a good job in putting these together. The previous ones have been super helpful. Our supervisor can't be here today, so I'm just going to do a brief introduction. As he has said at all of the meetings, the choice before us and what we're discussing is not a choice between A or B, the old code and the proposed code that everyone has seen, but what is going to result from all of these public engagement sessions. It really is vital that the community has input at all stages of this, and this is a vital aspect of getting a good code. So we look forward to seeing exactly what everyone has to say today and working together to make a good product that we can all really be proud of. Just a quick reminder, there is a quick meeting of the Orient Association right after this. So if you can stay around after, they would appreciate it. Thank you, and I'm gonna turn it over to Heather.
Thanks, Greg. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out on Memorial Day weekend. So today we're here, by the way, I'm Heather Lanza, the Town Planning Director, for those who don't know. We're here today to discuss the Southold Town zoning update with a special focus on Orient Hamlet. I have a lot of technology to wrangle here. So this is how we plan for this meeting to go. I'll talk for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have an hour for discussion, then a half an hour for hearing what people have to say at the end. We have something a little different in store for the breakout group if you've been to these in the past. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. To honor everyone's time, we do plan to end this part at 11 a.m. And one thing I'd like you to do is please hold your questions until the very end. They may be answered later in the presentation or during those breakout sessions. If not, then they might be answered during the reports at the end. And if not, if we have time, we can do a short Q&A, or you can call or email our planning office with your questions. We also have question forms at the front where you could write a question down at the sign-in table, and also our website has a question form that we check every few days and try to answer. So, most of you know this, but zoning's important because it shapes the future of the town and how it will look and feel. It affects the quality of life for residents. It has an impact on local businesses. If you're brand new to zoning, we do have a handout on the tables labeled Zoning 101, where you can get a quick overview of how it works, because I'm gonna, in the interest of time, skip those basics on zoning. Southold Town Comprehensive Plan was adopted in 2020, and zoning and the comprehensive plan are closely linked because in New York State, the town zoning must be consistent with and support the goals of the comprehensive plan. The plan has many goals that relate to zoning regulations or that could be implemented by zoning. It incorporates smart growth principles in its objectives related to growth, with goals to concentrate any higher density in the hamlet centers and create more walkable communities. That we have a new comprehensive plan is the main reason for this project, together with the fact that we haven't done a major overhaul of our zoning since 1989. Today, we'll get into some specific examples about how this proposed zoning could help us achieve some of the goals of the plan. So we'll start with a little bit about Orient. Here's a location map for those who might not be from here. Orient's way out on the eastern end of the North Fork, and it's one of the smaller hamlets in Southold Town. And it also includes Plum Island. Oh, and I just, for the purposes of the people who are listening on Zoom, I just want to let the Zoom attendees know that we can only have you observe. We don't have the technology to have you participate. So this is being recorded on Zoom, and this will be posted on the website later this week. So we're going to take a quick look at the proposed zoning for Orient and compare it to the existing. We don't have time to run through every change in the map today, but we do have a map segment in our breakout session this morning where you'll have a chance to examine the existing and proposed zoning more closely and make comments about specific parcels. Jumping right into it. This is the existing zoning for Route 25 near Village Lane, and I have mislaid my pointer. Okay, I'll use the mouse. Oh, you can sort of see the arrow. Route 25 is right in the middle of this map. And then over to the left side, you have the B zone, which is general business. Oh, and by the way, I'm zooming in like this because these areas with the commercial zoning are the places where you'll see the most changes to the zoning map. The residential zones are mostly staying the same on the map. So, like I said, in the middle of the map is Route 25. You have Tabor Road right down the center. Probably should find my pointer. It's in the sorry about that. I'll get a pointer, it'll help. But I'll try to describe. The HD you see is called Hamlet Density. There's one little parcel across from the Candyman. The B zone on the corner of Oyster Ponds and Route 25, that's general business. There's a little bit more B zone that you can see over on Tabor Road across from the firehouse. And then one other B zone farther to the east at the Orient Service Center. So now we're going to pop over to the the proposed map in the same area. So the red area is what you saw on the existing map as general business, is proposed to change to something called corridor business. Very similar to the existing business zone, except there is a proposal to remove the retail and restaurant uses from that zoning district. Existing retail and restaurants would be allowed to stay, expand, and be transferred to new owners under new proposed non-conforming rules for business districts. And then across the street from there, from the Candyman area, is the Hamlet Density Zone is now proposed to be something called Hamlet Residential, and not much changes in that zoning district besides the name. The B zones across from the firehouse on Tabor Road, they're proposed to change to a zone called Rural Business 2. This zone allows the current uses there and generally has less intense uses than corridor business. It's the zone that's proposed to replace the limited business zone, which seemed to be more appropriate for this area. And there also was a small portion of that bigger 10-acre parcel right next to this that had a tiny bit of B zone, and that's proposed to change to R80 to match the surrounding zoning of that 10-acre parcel. And the B zone at the Orient Service Center is proposed to be corridor business with the current uses still allowed there. I think I can just describe it. Sorry, no pointer. So back to the existing zoning. Now we're down farther, right where we are now, on the corner of Skippers and Village Lane is the red box of something called Hamlet Business Zone. That's the Hamlet Center zoning, and it runs from this side, it runs from here on this side of Village Lane back out towards Route 25, includes 5 more parcels on the road and a couple behind. Down by the Orient Yacht Club, you have a little bit of something called Resort Residential. That's the little RR. Oh, thanks, Mara, that helps. And the Yacht Club itself is zoned Marine 1. So onto the proposed zoning. The Hamlet Business Zone is proposed to stay the same, but change to a new zone, stay the same on the map, but proposed to change to a new zone called Hamlet Mixed Use 1. It has many of the same uses as Hamlet Business, but leaves out some of the more intense ones, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The resort residential zoned area is proposed to be changed to residential 40 to match the surrounding zoning, because the size of those parcels don't lend themselves to resort development. The yacht club remains Marine 1, which retains the same uses as the existing Marine 1. And I just want to say, we understand many of you are very concerned about how your zoning might have changed. These forums are too short to get into a specific evaluation of every parcel that's being proposed to change. In the breakout discussion, there's a map component that everyone will be able to participate in that. And we ask that if you have a concern about a specific parcel, that's the time where you could make a note of it by writing it down. We have sticky notes. We also have a form for feedback where you can provide us your address and tell us your concern. And I think that's the most efficient way for us to get everybody's concerns logged. We have a lot of resources available for you to learn more about this zoning update, to see if maybe nothing much is really changing for your parcel. Most parcels in town, there's almost no change. A zone name change doesn't necessarily mean anything substantive changed for your parcel. As resources for you, we have the website, we have a zoning resource center, a town hall where you can look at everything in person. You can submit questions to the planning department and we can help you find out exactly how this affects you. And at the end of this, there'll be a slide with all the information of how to do all of that. And just also know the town board is going to review and consider all your comments. And we're going to log all those, we're going to provide them on the website, and we're going to provide answers to them on the website. So this entire proposed zoning is truly a draft, and we need your help to get it right. All right, so now we're going to go into the project. Back to the bigger picture, what are the goals of this project? One goal is to modernize the code, make it easier to use. The other is to ensure our zoning is consistent with and implements our town comprehensive plan. The updated zoning code and zoning map have many changes with the intent to meet those goals. 2 weeks ago, we presented an overview of the entire code. We explained the different sections and how they work together. There's a copy of that on paper on the tables if you're interested. We posted videos from that on the website. So if you need a basic overview of the code, the resources are there for you. Today, we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to go over 5 areas of the comprehensive plan goals and community priorities and explain how we think the updated zoning addresses them. And in the breakout discussion session, these 5 topics will be the point of discussion as well as the maps. One of the handouts you have is a packet about the breakout session. It has the questions we'd like you to discuss, and it has the information I'm about to present to you, so you have it handy and you don't have to take notes about this next series of slides. So here we go. One of the first goals listed in the town's plan is to update the town zoning, and that's what got us started on this project. The goal outlines how the code needs to be modernized, made easier to use, and it proposes to do this in several ways. The existing code, if you've ever tried to use it, answering this basic question, what uses are allowed on my parcel, is really hard to answer because you have to flip back and forth pages, and also finding out what the minimum requirements are. They're back in a table, back in an appendix. So the new code has a better organization. There's a table of uses where you can write down one table, all the uses allowed in the zone. It has a whole section on conditions and standards, all in one place to make it easier to use. Those used to be scattered throughout the code. And again, with definitions, once scattered throughout, they're all in one place. So we're going to focus on these 5 areas to talk about how this proposed zoning is implementing our comprehensive plan. We chose these 5 because they have also been identified as community priorities, both in our forums from last spring, but also the North Fork Civic Survey done in 2022. which had a lot of respondents. And so these topics were identified as among the top ones. These are also topics listed on the feedback form on the town zoning website. So if you want to fill out one of those forms, this is going to give you a lot more information along those lines. So we're going to go through each of these to let you know how we think. Well, this is also so you have a starting place for the breakout group discussions. So how does this code affect housing affordability? It's such an important topic that our comprehensive plan has an entire chapter dedicated to it. And there's a whole nother plan to implement that, the community housing plan completed last year. It's also mentioned in other chapters of the plan, including economic chapter. Businesses are having trouble keeping employees because they can't afford to live here. The proposed code has a number of sections intended to increase the creation of housing that people can afford. This dovetails with two other efforts by the town that are ongoing right now. One is the Community Housing Fund, which can provide financial incentives and assistance with housing. The other is working to curtail the expansion of short-term rentals that take away from our year-round house rental opportunities. Town board is working on those now. So we're going to start with the residential zoning districts. One way to create some options for places to live is to make an accessory apartment in your home. Our code allows these now, and the new rules are proposed to be similar, with a size limit of 750 square feet. You need a rental permit. The maximum size is 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. It has to be less than or equal to 25% of the living space of the entire house. You have to provide a little bit of parking. And between the house and apartment, one has to be for the sole use of the owner, and the other needs to be leased for year-round occupancy. And then another option in the residential zones is to create an accessory apartment in a separate building on your parcel where your house is. So it could be an existing building like a garage, or it could be a small cottage built for this purpose. And that's allowed now in the code. So the rules in the proposed code are similar, except we made it easier in the proposed code. So there are less steps to get approval for this, what's called a detached accessory dwelling, because you would no longer need to go for the ZBA special exception. So it's the same rules as the other, so I'm going to skip talking about those. Yeah. Now we'll talk about accessory apartments in the commercial zones. These are for buildings where the primary use is commercial. For example, a 2-story building with shops on the first floor, apartments on the second floor. They're already allowed in our existing code, with some zones requiring they be affordable. And they're all currently restricted in size to less than 850 square feet. In the proposed code, we tried to add incentives so that more of these might be created. One of the incentives was that half the units could be market rate, and that no site plan would be needed if there's no change to the building footprint. Some of the controls would be a limit on the size, so upping it from the less than 850 to up to 1,000 square feet, and also that half would have to be affordable, meaning they're rent controlled, and the tenants would have to be eligible for community housing. Eligible meaning income eligible. A new option in this proposed code is the creation of residential buildings as the primary use. These do require site plan review by the planning board. And again, the proposed code has incentives for these. The number of apartments used to be regulated by, well, it was called dwelling units, and it used to be regulated by a yield map, and it was very restrictive, so nobody ever built these. In the proposed code, it's going to be more based on form and function and the health department. So setbacks, building height, lot coverage. Half could be market rate, which we hope is an incentive, and then half would have to be affordable. And also flexible formats. So it could be an apartment house, it could be small rental cottages, it could be a combination of both. There's a size limit of 1,500 square feet, and the zones where it's allowed would be, excuse me, corridor business, rural business 2, hamlet mixed use 1 and 2, and transition zones. And By the way, the overview document has a list of all the zoning districts at the back of it. So there's a couple of those overview documents on the tables. So this proposed code would make it possible to have a commercial building and a separate residential building on the same parcel if it has the right size to do that, without having to meet minimum lot size for each. Other rules still apply. So there's lot coverage, building height, parking requirements, setbacks, health department rules, meaning that this really can't create unlimited new density because there's still a lot of protections in place. This really just makes it easier, with some incentive being the market rate portion. So another thing we added to the code is addressing this idea of, we hear from employers all the time, we can't keep employees, they can't afford to live here. The proposed code includes a new use called the caretaker dwelling. It's listed as an accessory use in all the non-residential zones, and the standards for it are as follows. You get one per property for an employee and their household members. You'd require a rental permit. It could be up to 1,500 square feet in size. The person living there would have to prove they are employed by the owner or operator of the business, and they need to provide at least one parking space. Related to caretaker dwelling is a special new accessory use for farms to house their year-round employees. Farms have traditionally housed seasonal workers, and that's allowed in our current code. But as farms have evolved, the need for year-round housing for farm workers has become necessary. And the new term is farm worker housing, and some of the regulations around that are, it's allowed in all the zones where farm operations are permitted. It's an accessory use to a farm. The farm has to be bona fide, meaning, they meet certain requirements in the proposed code. There's a rental permit, proof of full-time employment by the farm operation. There's a limit to the size. They're not allowed to have basements. They need to be clustered together, and they would have to go for site plan if there were 3 or more. And again, these are all proposed, and that's a brand new idea for us. Just a touch also on what used to be the affordable housing zoning district. It's now an overlay district called the community housing overlay. That it's an overlay zone just means if it's applied to a parcel, the parcel still has the underlying zoning in addition to the uses of the new overlay zone. The community housing overlay district is very similar to what's in the code now in the affordable housing district. To meet our comprehensive plan goals and smart growth principles, this overlay zone is proposed to be only allowed in what's called the halo zones and the hamlet centers, or on parcels that are already developed. And you could see those areas on the maps. Those halo zones were created during the hamlet stakeholder work and adopted by the town board some years ago. The idea behind them was to identify areas that were suitable to have higher density close to hamlet centers. The houses or apartments created in this with this overlay would have to be affordable forever. There could be up to 12 dwellings per acre. They could be in the form of apartments or cottages, or could be subdivided into small lots with small houses. The actual size and number would be regulated by health department. So I don't mean to scare people by the 12 houses per acre. There are physical constraints, there's height restrictions, and to actually reach the highest density anywhere from locations that aren't connected to a sewer, the health department would require something called sanitary flow credits. Those are in limited supply, and they always will be. And I won't get into why now, but these rules don't make unlimited density suddenly possible. It just wouldn't happen because of the other protections. Next, we're going to hit on another topic, natural resources conservation. That's chapter 6 of our comprehensive plan, natural resources and environment. It contains many goals to protect our natural resources, including goals to protect water quality and quantity, trees, natural lands. On the topic of water quality, that ranked very highly as community priorities, both in the forums we held last spring and the North Fork Civics Survey of 2022. And we all know water quality of our bays and our drinking water are interconnected. Our water comes from the ground. The water in the ground flows into the creeks, bay, and sound. Septic systems pollute the groundwater. Lawn chemicals pollute the groundwater. It's what we drink and what we swim in the creeks and the bays and the sound. So anything we can do in zoning to lessen that pollution into the ground will help these issues. Our existing code has some features that protect our natural resources, but to what extent can we improve all of that in this zoning update? And we're still trying to answer that. We did add some new regulations to meet this goal in this proposed zoning. For instance, there's a cap on the amount of hotel rooms that can be located at marinas because they're very close to the groundwater there. There's also a higher amount of land required per hotel room for any proposed hotels. To address water quantity, the town board, separately from the zoning update, is currently considering adding regulations around irrigation of lawns. And we know more needs to be done to protect this precious resource. The town has a water advisory committee that's looking more closely to see what else we can do along those lines in this zoning update. There's also a section in the proposed code that addresses trees. It's basically says the clearing of trees and other vegetation and grading of the land would not be allowed without a building permit or an approved site plan. There are exceptions for agriculture and removing dead or dying trees that are a safety hazard. And of course, the lot coverage restriction in this proposed code now includes compacted surfaces as well as buildings. The concept and intended effect is to find balance between open space and constructed surfaces and buildings. But we've heard a lot about this at these forums and probably needs some adjustments to get it right, especially for very small lots. So we're going to be working on that. Of course, there are already a lot of other protections in place for our natural resources that will continue along with this effort. The town will continue its land preservation program and preserving land for open space. The subdivision code, which is a separate chapter, remains in place and does an awful lot towards preserving our natural resources by requiring clustering of lots and mandatory land preservation. So on to community character. Chapter 5 is where that's located in our town comprehensive plan. And that includes, community character includes things like quality of life, visual and scenic character. Quality of life ranked very high among the qualities most important to our community. We all love it out here. We want it to stay great. Our existing code already does a lot to protect community character, and the proposed code carries those things forward. So these include the house size limitations that were added fairly recently. They're proposed right now to be the same as in the existing code. Outdoor lighting regulations currently reside in another code section separate from zoning. Those are proposed to be moved to zoning, the zoning chapter, with the hope it'll be easier to enforce and light pollution problems can be better addressed. Walls right now are allowed right on the property line. The proposed code says they need to be set back. What is now a one-size-fits-all hamlet business zone for our hamlet centers is proposed to be split into 2 different zoning districts. So I showed you that on the map earlier, that Orient has a small hamlet business district right here. And the proposed is something called Hamlet Mixed Use 1, which has less intense uses than the Hamlet Mixed Use 2. The Hamlet Mixed Use 2 would be for the larger hamlets, and Hamlet Mixed Use 1 is for the smaller. And rural characters, another subcategory of community character. The idea of it ranks very highly when you put that out there in a survey. The North Fork Civic Survey had it ranked highly, but it's closely linked to our agricultural community and their success. So next we're going to talk about the many changes being proposed to help farms stay viable. So farms and agriculture were also ranked highly by people at our meetings last spring and also in the North Fork Civic Survey. And agriculture is a big part of our community's identity as well as economy. So much so that our comprehensive plan has an entire chapter dedicated to it. Goal number 1 of Chapter 9, Agriculture, in our plan is to retain and advance the industry of agriculture. Ensuring farms stay viable businesses leads to protection from overdevelopment. Land and farming is land that isn't being developed with more houses. The intent of the proposed code is to create a regulatory environment favorable to the continuation of farming in Southold Town. This new code is, I'll skip that. Notable proposed changes include having the idea of a farm operation be the principal use. It's kind of jargony, I know, but right now people have to provide 80,000 square feet of land for each little thing they do. That's all part of one big farm operation. So we think that's going to help a lot. Also added is the farm worker housing that I mentioned earlier, intended to address the need to house farm workers year-round. And the definitions we worked on and are still working on, really, to provide more clarity and remove inconsistencies. So next is economic development. So just starting with a summary of our vision statement and our comprehensive plan, it calls for a balance in supporting a vibrant economy while also protecting our quality of life and natural resources. So Chapter 7 has our economic development chapter, calls for retaining and supporting existing businesses and vibrant downtowns, but always with this idea of balance so that we can still stay, have what we love about Southold Town, prevent overdevelopment. So we'll start out with the first idea of support for economic growth. The proposed code's intent is to provide for more efficient use of the small amount of commercial land in the town. Only about 2 to 4% of the land in the town is zoned commercial or industrial. The ways this code provides support for economic growth include an added flexibility in the development standards. So one major impediment to commercial development in our existing code has always been the idea of one use per minimum lot size or building. And it meant you can only have one building if your lot wasn't twice as big as the minimum lot size required in the code. This led to overly large buildings in some cases where maybe 2 buildings or campus-style development would have fit in better with the surroundings. The proposed code provides much more flexibility, relying more on form and function, using setbacks, building height, parking requirements, and lot coverage. Multiple buildings would be allowed where it's beneficial. Multiple uses would be allowed, and mixed use is allowed in many zones, so you could mix residential and commercial or different types of commercial uses. Another way this code supports economic growth is by reducing the burden on applicants for development proposals that need both a special exception approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals and a site plan approval by the Planning Board. Right now, they have to go to 2 boards, 2 applications. This code proposes to have those applications that need both handled by 1 board, the Planning Board. So the applicant only needs to make 1 application to 1 board. And it also reduces administrative burden on the town and the public as well. Less hearings to attend. And then the balance side of this. So what are the protections we have against overdevelopment? I think by now we all see how interconnected all these issues that matter most to us really are. The protections in this proposed code to help achieve that balance are things we've already mentioned. So creating the new zoning district for the smaller hamlet centers is one way, putting limits on new hotels, making sure farms are viable, because a successful farm means the land won't be converted to new development. And there are many rules carried forward from our existing code that have and will continue to prevent overdevelopment. Things like building height, setbacks, site plan review, special exception review. And then there's other rules outside our code, such as the State Environmental Quality Review Act, our Wetlands Code, our town trustees, and the Suffolk County Health Department rules that allow only so much development where there's no sewers. And most of Southold Town has no access to sewers. Okay, now for the fun part. So for the next hour, we are going to have a breakout group discussion. Each side of the room, and it's not super segregated, but if you look in the back, there's a poll. And if your table's on this side, this is your side of the room. And if your table's on this side, this is your side of the room. So each side of the room has 6 tables, and each table has a sign on it with a topic. There are 6 topics. Start at whichever table you happen to be sitting. If you're not sitting and you want to get involved, come join a table. And that's your group. So your table is your group. You need to choose a note taker. Write the comments and discussion points on the big easel paper. It's in the middle. You have a big marker. And every 10 minutes, we're going to ask you to move to the next table. So we'd like you to stay on the same side of the room. And then page 2 in your packet had an idealistic diagram that doesn't work out too great in the way we have this set up, but we didn't have a lot of choices. So that shows you the progression of tables. So each table has a sign on it with the topic. So if you look at page 2 of the thing that says background information for breakout group topics, it tells you the order. So just go from 1, you start, if you're at 1, go to 2, if you're at 2, go to 3, if you're at 6, the map table, go all the way to 1. And that's how we'll progress. Does everyone understand how we're going to do this? So look for this thing called background information for breakout groups. It's on the table. Everyone has a copy of it. It gives you the order and the topics. And we'll tell you every 10 minutes, we'll say, time to switch, and you'll go to the next number up. And if you're at 6, you're going to move to 1. And in this packet is all the things I put on the slide. So you can see background information for each topic in this packet. And 10 minutes will begin now. So just write out what you talk about, answer the question. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's a question for each table in this packet. So look at the question and work on that question and give us suggestions. And that's what you would write down on the easel pad that's on your table. Yeah, we don't have easels, but we have pads on the table. And then at the end, we're going to ask you to pick a reporter to come up or come to a microphone and report out what you talked about. So keep that in mind so you can summarize what you talked about. Okay, so who wants to go first to report out? Is Zoom recording? Yes. Here's the mic. So we're going to have a wireless mic. We'll bring it over to you. Just raise your hand if you're ready to give us a summary of what you talked about.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. Okay, this is our summary.
Everyone, please quiet down so we can hear what people have to say. Okay. Could you please be quiet? Thank you.
or I'll have to yell. Okay, our first farms, this is our here. The number one issue for our group was that there must be limits on conversion of farms to housing development. As Alvin said, this will determine the future of Southold. Number one. Okay, natural resources. There were a few things. Some of them are listed here. There needs to be protection of the wetlands. There needs to be mitigation for sea level rise along Narrow River Road, for example, and the causeways. One of the big issues was that the new septic systems are too expensive. And there was a question of whether or not people knew about the state programs that would incentivize the upgrade. And how would you let them know? How can we curtail runoff from the farms? And then the one that really emerged here that we were all interested in, is there a way to incentivize getting rid of lawns and planting meadows? And there are groups up further on the island that are doing that, the Audubon, for example, where they're planting meadows and finding ways to conserve rainwater. Housing, is this a good summary or should I go faster?
This is good. No, you're doing good.
Okay. Uh, for housing affordability, everyone agreed that it's really important to create more housing that people can afford. That was pretty much the beginning and the end of the discussion. There were some important points here, though. Is that could we have an emphasis on proximity to public transportation? Excellent point. To buses and to trains. And would it be possible not just to allow affordable housing, but to incentivize affordable housing? That was one of the big issues. And I guess everyone here said we do not want to start looking like East Hampton. Okay.
Interesting.
Yep. Just little throwing some shade there in East Hampton. Okay. And community character, we feel like there should be more characters in our community. That was, no. The number one thing that came through was bikes, at least for this group here, because we have a lot of bikers. So we put some of our ideas up there, but make the area more friendly to bikers, maybe to walkers. If you could have a bike path, if you could have more walking paths, add the bike racks, perhaps slower speeds off the ferry and the causeway. That's probably unlikely. And better signage. And we thought, well, instead of just share the road with bikes, if you wanted to like bring in the farming community, share the road with tractors and bikes could be a series of signs. I think that's
great. Who wants to go next?
Okay. Thank you.
Who wants to go next? Come on.
Hi, I'm gonna. We never made it to natural resources, but we'll go quickly through a couple of the things that I can remember because we're now at housing affordability. For housing affordability, one of the issues is to allow for the apartment design without micromanaging. Right now, it all has to be one floor, one bathroom of a certain, the apartment of a certain size. The size of the apartment is less of an issue than the requirement for all on one floor because you may have a better design or circumstances for family that would be an upstairs downstairs scenario rather than all on one floor. Also, there's a restriction right now, only one bathroom. Why? If you have more than one person, oftentimes you need 1.5 bathrooms. Or if it's with family, you need 2 bathrooms, one for the kids, one for the parents. So again, micromanaging seems to work contrary to encouraging housing affordability and options. Community character. For example, in the hamlet of Orient, or as in the hamlet of New Suffolk and other kind of unique hamlets, the area was developed with very small lots with relatively larger homes, all from the 1800s. It becomes a very burdensome process to apply the minimum of 1 acre zoning on existing lots that are so undersized. You either have to go to the zoning board with huge variance requests, which cuts against you legally. And there may be absolutely no reason you should even have to go to the zoning board if you're building within your same footprint, but just doing some modifications, exterior or whatever. You already have historic preservation that is reviewing the design and the character. Leave it at that. Economic development, I personally, and my group agreed, that if you have a non-conforming business, and I would say that many of the businesses that are presently existing will become non-conforming, and either by size, use, or whatever. Allow a stopgap provision that provides for a change from one non-conforming to another non-conforming. So maybe it's not listed in the zoning code and maybe somebody is creative and it's a use that nobody had thought about. Or it's a use that in the village or in a particular hamlet is a necessary use, but isn't zoned. Other towns like Riverhead allow this. It goes through a special permit process. So it does get reviewed, it does get regulated, but it allows for the flexibility and the marketability of your commercial properties to do something other than whatever the list is, and the list may be getting smaller, and needs some flexibility. That all integrates with economic development. Farms, we thought it's good that farms are being encouraged. The uses are becoming flexible for farm worker housing or caretakers, workmen, what do they call it right now is, no, it's something else. I'm going through a process right now where it's a disaster. It's like a watchman's trailer for horse farms or other farms that have livestock that has to be monitored 24 hours a day. There has to be some provision for that. The maps, we never really got a chance to review very carefully. Did I miss anything? Yeah.
Oh, great. All right. Thank you,
Oh,
Pat.
sorry, one more question we had. Pardon me. This was a question. On accessory apartments or what are they calling the ancillary dwellings, the second dwellings, have we removed the requirement that it be the owner's principal residence in order to have an apartment? Or is that still, for example, if
The
you have,
proposed code doesn't have that in.
great, that's a wonderful thing.
All right, who wants to go next? And let us know a summary of what you talked about. Oh, I don't see any hands raised.
Don't be shy.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Since I didn't make notes, I'll have to go around to our posters. With respect to housing affordability, one question we had was, why does the accessory unit only have to be for rental? Why could it not also be for a caretaker or caretakers? This would seem to advance the idea of allowing people to stay in their homes as they get older. The new code doesn't seem to prevent market rate rentals for accessory dwelling units. For farm worker housing, the definition in the code, the new code, seems to suggest it only applies to employees. And we ask, is it for employees only or employees and their families? The idea of having, as was mentioned over here, the idea of only allowing the first floor for an accessory unit seems to be too limiting, particularly since the requirements for detached accessory units can be up to 750 square feet or as high as 18 or 20 feet, depending on the size of the lot. Residential use seems to be a mystery in terms of definition. As a primary use, yes. What's that?
And we will be writing all these down, so if you want to summarize, you don't have to hit every single one.
Wait, we can say, oh yeah, it's a community character. And this has to do with the community character. Adjusting house size code, especially for larger lots. We believe that although we made great progress, the town made great progress in adopting what we call the large house ordinance, we think that it should be amended to further limit the maximum size of homes, particularly as it gets into very large lots. The comp plan has embedded within it the concept of creating design standards, both for commercial and potentially residential development. And we're encouraging that design standard to be developed within the zoning code for both commercial and residential, so they can be considered by the various approving authorities. With respect to historic districts, particularly in Orient, we think that there should be a historic district overlay zone that specifically deals with the geographic area within which we have the historic area in Orient. Another point has to do with dark sky, particularly in areas like this. We think that there ought to be a way to more rigorously enforce, or at least inform people about dark sky requirements in terms of their outdoor lighting. One of the other issues had to do with fencing or hedge heights. And it seems as though there was a concern about the height of hedges in the area in terms of being able to reinforce community character. Let's see what else we have here. I know we had a couple of questions with respect to the agricultural enterprise or exclusive agriculture zone. The current proposal suggests that there be a 2-acre minimum zone, similar to, I think, the current zoning indicates. There's a definition of what's called bona fide farming in the code. And that definition indicates that a bona fide farm is 7 acres or more. To us, it seems like there's somewhat of a disconnect between saying that a bona fide farm is 7 acres, yet the minimum zoning is 2 acres. If the point of the zoning code is to encourage implementation of the comp plan, which is to encourage long-term agricultural use, we're not sure that 2-acre minimums is appropriate in the long term, particularly if bona fide farms are defined as at least 7 acres.
Just a clarification, you can also be a smaller farm and be
You can
bona
be a
fide.
smaller farm if you earn more than $50,000 a year.
And I know we'll be working on those numbers with our Ag
So
Advisory Committee.
anyway, there's somewhat of a confusion
Okay,
around
that's a good point.
what
Thank you.
represents a real farm
Sure.
with respect to the zone update.
Yep. Thank you.
I think that's good for our summary at the moment.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice. Does anyone else want to report out? Anybody else want to give us a little summary of some of the things you talked about? Doesn't have to be everything, just be a few things. I see some debate. Oh, there's a hand raised.
Venetia, just the three of us here, and we started on economic development. And one of the points we made there was to encourage you to think about employment opportunities that are not grounded in physical space. So, for example, a huge amount can be done by a small group of people internationally if they're working with internet things and stuff like that. So that question is, what are the resources available in our structure for internet capacity and so on? Southold right now still can't do anything, a lot of it. So just a whole thinking about how can a small group of people actually start a business here that maybe involves people working from their homes here or elsewhere or whatever. Another one was about you've got some co-creating for farms, but co-creating spaces for other businesses and outlets. So what else was there?
Thinking more creatively around
Did you use the mic? I'm sorry.
So just generally thinking more creatively about what economic development might mean for this community and what resources that might require. Again, particularly better internet provision, stuff like that, and outside of zoning per se.
Okay. Thank you.
We had a chat on community character about how bedevilingly difficult that phrase is. And that it means different things to different people. And some of what you're saying in the plan, of course, acknowledges that Orient and New Suffolk are not the same as Mattatuck and Cutchogue. But it almost feels like one needs to define each one. And I was being told, for example, that anybody who wants to sort of bring in hotels or development says, well, community character means zero, no change. You're not open to anything. And other people think that community character means, well, if you haven't been here for 50 or 60 years already, you're not really part of the community. And so there are lots of fraught little definitions there that perhaps need to be broken out in different ways. And I think we talked about hotels there in some order, and we're just saying, what kind of hotel? We don't really want, $1,000 a night, rich people only hotels. We need smaller hotels and things like this. And we've seen things about no aggretainment. I'm wandering all over the place here.
That's good.
And we agree with that. We certainly don't want Disney-like theme parks here. But little things, festivals and things. We have a festival in Marituck every year that doesn't seem to hurt anyone. And stuff like that. What else? Did we say anything else that we...
Just more coordination between agriculture and commercial permitting, so that farmers who want to try to do things with their land, it's easier for them to accomplish what are now considered multiple or different uses and require permits from different departments.
Right, I see.
So effectively, what we were talking about is we want to encourage active local farming and make farming commercially viable, but discourage aggretainment. And how do you balance those two things?
I see. That's a good point. Anybody else want to share?
We had concern at our group about, because our water table is so close to the top of the soil and we have a lot of farms here. And I personally know that the farm right next to me is using Roundup on their Roundup ready corn. And I think all the farms are using that because I looked at the Cauliflower Association. That's the only kind of seed they sell. So, we should really...
We don't purchase our corn.
Okay,
And it's not Roundup ready. It's not a GMO.
good.
We should talk to the active
I will. I'll talk to you. That's great. All right. Thank you. That's good.
Well, thanks, Erin.
Terrific.
I'm guessing that was Erin.
Glad to know that. The other thing that we were suggesting in our group is the Brown House, which is an older house that's really large that was made into apartments. And maybe there could be some sort of provision for existing large buildings to create multifamily housing. But of course, I know you have to deal with the septic requirements and stuff like that if you do that. But
Yeah. Okay, we have time for another couple summaries if anyone else would like to.
Hi, I think we agree with so much that's been said. You'll have all our notes to
Yes.
read. One of the things that we talked about was possibly all developers, hotels, housing communities, that those developers put some money aside, 30% or something of the building for affordable housing, that we start to really push them to share in the community. Also, maybe the developers should help maintain the roads. We touched on a lot of other things, but
Well, we wanted to know what was going on with the very end of Orient Point, where the Plum Island Ferry is, where the North Fork Ferry is, and where Duryea is. That's not clear as to what kind of development is allowed there at this point, although I have heard rumors about a hotel at Duryea's and other outbuildings, but I don't know what the fact is.
We haven't had anybody come in for a hotel there. It would be pretty challenging. They don't have a lot of land. There's a lot of rules that would apply. There's currently still a hotel moratorium. The town board's considering whether or not to renew it. So there's always a lot of rumors. We haven't heard anybody talking about a hotel there. And if there were, you would know about it because there'll be public hearings, there'll be vigorous environmental review. And I'm honestly not sure they have enough land to manage that there. Okay, anyone else want to, we have one more, we have time for one more summary. And again, if you didn't get to say something and you wrote it down, we'll get it on these pages.
Quick is one thing that came up in the maps was the idea that the interface with the maps that you go online could be a little more robust.
Yes, I agree.
So that when you click on something, it actually allows you to maybe reference other documents that are associated with that particular property. It gives a little more I think it's all there. It just needs to be budgeted and linked together so that that document becomes as living and usable as the text itself. I think we talked about farming a lot, just concerns about affordability generally. There was a lot of concern about how the land is taxed when the development rights have been sold versus not sold, and we were saying maybe it could be based less on cost, but maybe the type of land it is. And housing for farmers, that was one thing where I have concerns about that as having farmers be landlords. It's kind of another hat to wear, and it's a little complicated being a landlord. There's a lot of regulatory issues that start to come into that as well. So I think the town should be careful about that. And also kind of, it's not just about the farmer, it's also about the worker. And their work gets tied to their housing. So they're not performing well at work. Do they lose their housing? What is the nature of that relationship? And I think that's raises a lot of questions. And then, no, and then on upbeat on. So
I'm sorry, Aaron, I understand.
I wanted to talk about. Okay.
Thank you for offering.
And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was biking, which I think is a lot of people talk about biking. I think Southold, the North Fork is just an incredible place for that. I don't know if zoning can begin to talk about routes, easements, overlays to identify these potential and linking together the parks, the beaches, the resources, and really trying to use biking as a way to kind of put a thread to all the pearls that are scattered about.
Good points. Just on the, farm worker housing, there's a lot of rules in place, and, the farmers know, and we also have a rental permit process that talks about safety. And so those are valid concerns, but they're also being addressed and are being addressed. Yeah. So does anyone else have anything to say? Well, it's for the people on Zoom.
One thing we didn't talk about yet in community is promoting harmony between the year-round residents, seasonal residents, visitors, businesses, and farmers, kind of business. I wish I knew how to do that. But one thing I do know is web design. And there's a lot of talk I read in a lot of the town literature about just go to the town website. There are many town websites, and websites are very easy to harmonize, to link together. In fact, even the planning department page has many useful links to comprehensive planning, but it doesn't have any link to the Southold zoning update website, which is one of the dozen websites that belongs to the town. It's a very good website, and wouldn't hurt to add a link.
That's a mistake. Thanks for pointing that out.
Very easy to do.
Didn't notice that. Thanks, Benja. So we're going to wrap up now. Supervisor Krupski did arrive quite early in this procedure and has been here, and he would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Heather. So, I don't know, I missed the very beginning. Did you talk about the different breakout groups? because we will have specific to the marine industry, to agriculture, and to business, we're going to have separate forums just for those. So I think anyone, and it's not just if you happen to be a farmer or not, everyone's welcome at any of these to answer questions. As far as agriculture goes, we have an Ag Advisory Committee that would love to host you and answer questions, as well as a Land Preservation Committee. It fills the same role. So if you have any questions about agriculture, please either go to one of those committees, come to the forum, or talk to Erin. Either way, you're good. And you know, I think one of the good questions here was community character. Really, this is it. This is community. This makes community character. We've gone through this with a number of different areas and a number of different arenas. We'll continue to do that until we get everyone's input. So thanks for coming.